It's a good evening. Welcome to this virtual launch. My name is Zenzele Ndebele, and today it is a special day, great honor for us to be launching this documentary, which looks at the human rights abuses that happened mostly during the lockdown. I know most of us would have loved to gather in the same place and watch this documentary, have discussions and talk about some of the issues that we saw, share our experiences. Unfortunately, we could not do that because of the COVID lockdown. And as the pandemic it's really going on, it's bad, cases are rising, one can hope that we are all safe. As the Center for Innovation and Technology in the past year, we've been moving around during the lockdown, monitoring what is happening, observing, talking to communities, and we could not just ignore some of the issues that were going on. Initially, when the first lockdown was announced, the police soldiers were deployed to monitor or control the movement of people. And there was a curfew, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And a lot happened during that time. We managed to talk to some of the people who were victims of police brutality, beaten up for one reason or another. And one cannot just imagine what goes through someone's mind if they brutally beat someone just because they are out in the evening, or they are supposed to be at home. Yet we always have the courts. If someone is arrested or someone has done something wrong, why not arrest them? Why not give them a ticket so that they can get their day in court? What is said is that some people died during this time. During the lockdown. I know we have talked about one case or two of people who were killed, but there are so many other people who were killed. A young boy in Njube was beaten up and he died. We know that in Slovenia there was someone who died as well. So there are so many cases of people who were beaten up, who died, who were injured, and some of these cases we did not cover them in the documentary, or we could not cover everyone who was beaten up or who was assaulted during this time. So this is just a sample of what happened. What is said again is that most of these people did not get justice. The case in point is the issue of the Culture Park women who were beaten up. They managed to report the case after such a long time, and after with the back and forth, the police officers who were involved in beating up these ladies were identified. The case went to court, but a year and some months later, that case has not been finalized. So the women are still waiting for justice. They are waiting for these guys to, get their day in court, get some, whether a sentence or something that will actually make these ladies feel justice has been done. But the sad part is that these two guys who were involved in assaulting these ladies are moving around the streets, probably continuing to do what they were doing, abusing people, assaulting people. The case of Paul Munakopa is another serious case of human rights violations, where someone was just killed because he was out in the evening. For whatever reason, his death was not justified. And the guys who killed him as well are working somewhere, still in uniform, enjoying with their families. But Paul is not there to look after his family today. So we have so many cases of people who were beaten up and they never received any justice. We also talked to some of the people who were so much afraid, to come forward to talk about their cases. Some of them were made to pay a fine where it was not necessary. And people paid $500 fine or $1,000 just because they were afraid that they would be victimized. So the element of fear in our people is so much. I know the 2013 Constitution changed the police from the police force to the police service. But we are yet to see the service that is offered by our police officers. Because during the lockdown, they were really a police force. And their force was felt by many Zimbabweans. We really appreciate the help. We acknowledge and appreciate the help that was offered by organizations that are dealing with human rights. A lot of people were represented by the lawyers for human rights, Abameli, and other people who are involved in human rights work. Kempton Jenny also, I know, assisted a number of women who were abused during the lockdown, because there were also a lot of domestic violence. We really hope that these organizations are going to continue to carry on their good work. My appeal to authorities is that can we please make sure that those who commit crimes, those who abuse human people, other human beings, those who violate people's human rights should be brought to book. And unfortunately, we cannot run away from the fact that the Kukuraundi culture is still with us 40 years after independence. The issue of impunity, the fact that I can beat you up and nothing is going to happen to me, is still within the force. So many people who are working for the state, who are representing the state, feel like they can kill you, they can beat you, and nothing will happen to them. And that is the case in these cases that we have covered. So when are we going to go out? When are we going to come out of the Kukuraundi mood? When are we going to respect the lives of Zimbabweans? When are we going to respect the lives of other fellow citizens? What have Zimbabweans done to deserve such a government that does not respect their human rights, that does not bring to book those people who abuse the human rights? I think in the 21st century, we really need to do better. When we talk about Zimbabwe having moved from the First Republic to the Second Republic, we should see the change in the way officers of law behave, in the way public servants behave. But I'm yet to see that. Because what happened during the Kukuraundi era, what happened during the Mugabe era, is still happening today. So what has changed? Maybe it's just in our minds. Maybe it's just a name from the First Republic to the Second Republic. But everyone else in the ground, on the ground, in the offices, still behave as if this is 1982. I hope that the authorities are going to take some of these issues seriously. Because honestly, there's no reason why the police officers who beat up Country Park women, their case has not been finalized. And I think the government can easily win the minds of people by prosecuting these cases. If the guys are not guilty, then let's know that they're not guilty and they're acquitted by the courts. But if the cases drag on and on, then we ask ourselves what's going on. And like people always say, justice delayed is justice denied. So I like to thank everyone who has joined this online documentary launch, and I know after this there's going to be a discussion where we'll be talking about the human rights violations during lockdown. And of course, the lockdown has been used to violate people's rights, to make sure that to limit the freedom of movement, to limit the freedom of expression. We know the Balagwa case where Pechuliga Zulu was trying to go and erect a memorial, Kukuraundi memorial plaque, and they're told that no, this is during lockdown, you can't do this. Eventually the event happened, but the plaque was stolen. And we know the plaque was stolen as well in Slovenia. So what kind of a country are we? What kind of people are we breeding? What kind of a society are we? Where people cannot commemorate the dead, where people cannot walk freely, where we are not proud of being Zimbabwean. Kwesinye isikhathi kumele sizinuka amakhwapha sizibuze ukuthi kade singabantu abanjani, siyanga sivela nga, kade sizamani. Kambe sure sesingatshona sikuGugurawundi mchokocho for the next 40 years. So if you don't have power, you're always a victim. And what is said is that some of the victims, some of the perpetrators now have been victims before. And some of the victims have become perpetrators. So the cycle of violence continues because we've never sat down as Zimbabweans to say we have something wrong with our country. We think the only way to solve our problems is via violence. There's a lot that needs to be done. Unfortunately, organizations like the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission have just become organizations by name. It's not clear what they are there for. They're not doing anything. So we hope that they will pick the pieces, they are going to dust themselves, and they're going to do what they are mandated to do. Thank you very much for taking your opportunity, taking your time to join us this evening on this documentary launch. Thank you.
I want to thank SITE for inviting me to this opportunity. As many of you already know, the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission is the national human rights institution for Zimbabwe, established in terms of Section 242 and 243 of the Zimbabwean Constitution. Its functions relate to the protection, promotion, and enforcement of human rights and social freedoms, as well as protecting the public against abuse of power by state institutions. This therefore means that the Commission has a dual mandate, which also includes the public protector role. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission plays a central role within society as it works to ensure that social injustices and human rights violations are dealt with. This has been done over the years through the following way. The Education, Promotion and Research Department that promotes the respect of and attainment of human rights and social justice for various target groups via several platforms and methods, e.g., radio and TV programs, educating the public about their rights and responsibilities of duty bearers, outreaches in the most remote areas of the country, and training on human rights and administrative justice to duty bearers. The Commission during lockdown ensured that the public were aware of their rights and limitations thereof. Secondly, the Monitoring and Inspections Department, which inspects detention centers, including prisons, police cells, health facilities, as well as old people's homes. During the past year and a half, it has also monitored the human rights situation during lockdown and how this has impacted the public and highlighted the challenges through press statements and provided recommendations for various stakeholders, including government, to ensure that human rights violations are minimized. Thirdly, the Complaints Handling and Investigation Department, which receives and investigates allegations of human rights violations and those of abuse of power by public officials. The Commission in 2020 received many complaints from members of the public relating to abuse of power by duty bearers, which had a negative impact on the exercise of their rights. This included exercise of freedom of movement, where the public has to pay at security checkpoints, partisan distribution of aid, and increased cases of domestic violence, of which such cases, because of COVID-19, took long to be dealt with. The Commission has embarked on joint investigative missions with other sister commissions, such as the Zimbabwe Gender Commission, in an effort to protect and promote human rights and social justice. In order to appreciate and acknowledge the work of other players in protecting human rights and promoting social justice, the Commission has created several thematic working groups for specific human rights issues. Hence, the Commission has established working relations with other organizations for concerted effort in the promotion and protection of human rights. These include CSOs, learning institutes, and research institutes, and other institutes as well. Also, the Commission has established strategic partnerships with several human rights organizations through signing MOUs. Through these MOUs, the Commission has managed to hold mobile human rights clinics with CSOs. It has also established a referral pathway where CSOs bring cases of human rights violations for investigation, and the Commission also refers members of the public to other CSOs for litigation, counseling, and other services. Therefore, the Commission is not the sole player in the field of human rights. The role of CSOs remains critical in ensuring that human rights violations and social injustice are amplified and redress is sought. Therefore, CSOs are encouraged to continue to voice the human rights violations and social injustices that happen in the country for the improved protection and promotion of human rights and freedoms. Thank you for this opportunity.
Paufu panapa uori hwakawanda hautengeswi chaizvo chaizvo because time yetinomira panapa yakawandisa tinofanira kutora time diki vanhu vototengeswa uvhu hwavo zviri proper vanhu voenda kumusha but tinotora time yakareba takangounganidzwa uvhu hwacho vamwe vanopinda vanobuda tutu mapurisa ndiwo anotanga kuwana futi uvhu hwacho anokondrora isusu vanhu takangomira tisina chetidodi chatinowana saka ngazvigadziswe zvozvoti plus kana hufu chaihwo kana ngahundewo mumasection tisanyanya kuungana sezvizvi hufu ukapinda mumasection tinotenga uvhu hwedu nenguva diki hatiungani tikati section hufu chuya vokondoravo panenge pane vanhu kana kuti 50 zvine zviri nani asi tarirai mawandira takaita iko zvino saka chero chirwere chacho tokwanisa kungopanana tichizodzana chirwere
mina bengicela ukuthi into yakhona ibe le order amaphoyisa angasethuselwa so MDC thina la le corona sisilwisayo anti so bengabe bezosethuselana so MDC la so into ze politics lesi bengabuyela bezosethuselana la nje amaphoyisa akasuka emputhwini abahambe besemzali benza umsebenzi le abasuke la sizenzele sodwa ngcono siqambane thina sibe le order sodwa amaphoyisa wale problem akhonza konke khona okwenzakala indaba amaphoyisa kanti simpuphu nebathethe bahamba layo yaphuma iroli oflotela impuphu eneyobamba la amaphoyisa kanti sibabopha umuntu la bamfaka phakathi lapha bakhangele umuntu anuthe amaphoyisa angathatha impuphu namuhla siyaliboka siyayithatha impuphu yantsalithathela bathatha umuntu bamfaka phakathi lapha sikhangele
tine vana ava vadiki ava tasemona kuti vakaita sei sinzi makuseni havana kugeza havana kudya tiri kufamba navo titsvage uvhu tonzi hakuna ibvai kumapurisa torohwa nzidzokerai kudzimba saka tiendepi tinozvishanda hatichisina kana sendi mudzimba isusu hatina kana mari
sinzi kudala simile amalana lawo empuphu kodwa labo bomthetho sibili sakwazi basebenzela uhulumende thina singabantwana sibili silambile ezindlini la kodwa labo bengasihlukuluzi manxa simile emalani bami besitshele ngesihle nokuthi besethele ngama-button stick ngoba thina siphila kuleli lizwe singabalanga.
Between March and April in 2020, the world as most of us knew it came to a standstill. Governments announced lockdowns. COVID-19 had already been declared a pandemic. In Zimbabwe, a preemptive lockdown was announced. The country was yet to experience a crisis of the spread of infections.
For the first time, we have asked you not to go to work, not to see your families, and to keep your distance from each other. This is the very opposite of the Zimbabwean way, which is characterized by warmth and closeness. The vast majority of Zimbabweans have acted selflessly and with great responsibility. Like a country in wartime, you put your nation first and put aside individual needs and rights.
President Mnangagwa deployed security services, the army and the police, to enforce the lockdown, which included a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew.
As of tomorrow, Wednesday, 22nd July 2020, all our security services must enforce a dusk to dawn curfew set to come into force daily between 6 o'clock in the evening and 6 o'clock in the morning. Only essential services are exempt from this curfew.
Curfews and restrictions of movement have a bad history in Zimbabwe. And true to their nature, history repeated itself. Reports of police abuses surfaced in urban communities. Movement restrictions were brutally enforced. People were beaten up, and a number of murders were recorded. The Center for Innovation and Technology, CITE, documented several cases of abuse which happened under the cover of a lockdown. CITE also commissioned investigations into 2 police shootings. The first shooting resulted in the murder of a Bulawayo resident, Paul Munakopa. The official police investigation has not yielded much, and the outcome, if any, has not been publicly communicated. The other investigation involved the shooting and the resulting injury of Emmanuel Mavunge. In this documentary, we present the stories of those who fell victim to a series of human rights violations at the hands of the abusive police. We also present the findings and recommendations of a professional investigating team that looked into the shootings of Paul and Emmanuel. We also name the culprits within the Zimbabwe Republic Police who committed these human rights violations. We start off in Kadri Park in one of the cases that we extensively covered. What started off as a trip to the local shops for the two Mpofu sisters, Nogutula and Tombizodwa, ended up as a painful ordeal of beatings, verbal abuses, and detention.
Ngahamba ngahlala phansi lo dadewethu ngoba sasilinde umuntu wayengena koTM ukuthi aphumele isinke sasimphathise sona. Asilandela amapholisa lawana asithola sihlezi phansi afika abuza ukubana sihlaleleni. Udadewethu uthe nxa ephendula ukuthi silinde umuntu ongene koTM basichaya bebabili kodwa bona babehamba bengu6. Sachaya ngababili abangobaba. Bathi hambana endlini. Mina ngangihlezi phansi sengikhumula izicathulo ngoba njengomuntu oyesekhathele. Nxa ngisukuma mina ngisithi ngiqonde endlini udadewethu ebuyela koTM elanda imali yakhe ayiphathisa umuntu. Bangibhodela ngemva kwamashop ngahlangana nabo. Bangifaka ama-cuffs. Bangibopha izandla bazibophela emuva. Bangibuza ukubana udadewethu engihamba laye ngathi angazi. Nxa ngithi angazi kanjalo ukhona omunye officer owesifazana oyemkhangele. Wathi nangiyana eminyango kwaTM. Samlandela ke kanjalo. Nxa sifika lapha bambamba la bambopha izandla emuva ngokufanayo. Sabuza ukubana siya ngaphi kwathiwa siye police. Sasuka koTM sa epolice eseduze eCountry Park. Nxa siqeda ukuphuma koTM kulendlela eliganga iground usiyafika epolice station. Bahamba besihlalisa phansi njalo besichaya. Indlela yonke saye safika epolice station. Nxa kade sifike epolice station kwakule mota eyayipake phandle iQuantum. Kwathiwa sihlale ngemva kweQuantum liyana, sahlala ngemva kweQuantum liyana. Basichaya. Sasukuma sangeniswa phakathi. Nxa sifika phakathi bafika basingenisa phakathi besichaya. Besitshela ukubana amandebele ayazenzisa. Bona balabafazi abangcono ukudlula thina. So ukuthi sasiyenzeni asikwazi. Sachaywa kanjalo phakathi salaliswa epolice kwathiwa singaphumi masingafayindanga.
When police arrested the two sisters, they charged them with violating lockdown regulations. On the admission of guilt receipts, they recorded that they'd been arrested for conduct that is likely to cause breach of peace. When assaulting them, ethnic discrimination and misogyny were weaponized to justify these violations.
Besithuka besithi siyazinzisa mina iyiphula kweleli liyambona ngani liyamangalisa bethi lo ubona ngani ukuthi iqolo kwakho lokho kuncane kuyamangalisa silabafazi abangcono thina ukudlula lina but singakwazi ukuthi siphambaniseni khonapha besithethisa ngendlela enjalo bayenza izifiso zabo zonke ababezifuna ukuthi baze babhodle kithi.
They showed us the bruises and they've actually went to a doctor and the doctor as report confirmed that they'd been assaulted by the police and they'd suffered a lot of injuries. These women later made a report and their case is being investigated. So it is quite sad that 40 years after independence, the behavior of the police has not changed. We still have police who would assault women, for that matter, for absolutely doing nothing. During the process, they were called Damaule, Watamandebele Azenzisa, and all those things like that. I hope the police and every other authority are going to investigate this matter seriously.
Later, Constable Simbarashe Vekwa and Tichawane Zariro were charged with assault. They appeared in court. Their trial has been facing delays. The two are walking free and their victims are still waiting for justice. Over the lockdown period, we met many more people who had been assaulted. Their stories were consistent. They'd all resigned to the fact that impunity will prevail. There was no use pursuing the cases as police eventually get away with human rights violations.
Ngazengeta mhla ka-14 on a Tuesday. Sembuya ngapha town. Ngo-7 ebusuku. And then ngoba amapolice ihamba nge-private. and then abanye bambaleka mina ngasala mile, and then bantshela ukuthi bambuza ukuthi nawe ungabaleki, mina no amelanga ngibaleke, angitshela imbizile kwathiwa no uyadelela, baqasa ungitshaya, and then bandimaza isandla, babreak another bone esandla sami, and then ngiyayoripota but still kuyafanana, there's nothing.
So you report wife out.
Echabalala.
So from the time wife report up to now, what has happened?
Akula, and then ngahamba ku-doctor, akula nto eyenzakala.
So who's paying for medical bills?
I'm paying for myself.
And have you tried to make a follow-up on the police?
Ngibona ukuthi ungangisiza ngoba reporting amapolisa to amapolisa is waste of time to me.
The lockdown did not pay attention to the needs of the less privileged who had to spend hours in mealie meal queues. The police enforcing regulations targeted civilians at the queues and beat them up. Ordinary citizens, therefore, found themselves trapped in their houses with no food and a threat of violence in the streets. Lawrence Ngwenya is a Cowdrey Park resident. At the height of the lockdown, when there was a severe shortage of mealie meal, he went to the shops with others to queue for supplies. Members of the Zimbabwe Republic Police patrolling the area came to monitor the queues. A commotion ensued and the police started beating up people. That is when his ordeal started.
Then there was this other chef police. He was going line and amapolisa bachela uti chaya. Then this guy started beating people. Mnabangishaya lapha emuva. Ngathi bangishayile so the ngazama uthi ngihambe ngibaleke kwakule into I think nge-Econet something like that. So ngathi ngibhoda ngapha ngachayisana lo mpholisa lwana. That's where I got a thorough beating. The guy beat me repeatedly. Wangishaya so ngama ngezwa ukuthi ngime ngithule. Ngama I think I don't know whether he was enjoying it. I don't know ukuthi wakuhamba njani but kwathi ngime ngithule ngama wachaya ngaze ngasuka wangilandela elokhe ngichaya wangichaya lapha ngayikho ngijumpa nje ngigijima siyakuma lapha. So everybody wathi abanye bambiza ayibuyangapha abanye there's some ladies wathi thatha inamba yakhe this thing awumelanga ibe nje so thatha inamba yakhe things like that. People were saying because it was so painful indlela wanchaya ngayo and it was painful, humiliating. Angazi ukuthi if you are a country then you have such people about treat people that way, then we have a problem, a big problem. Because at the end of the day, indlela wangishaya ngayo I don't know what achievement yakho ayifuna ukuyi-achieve yini. I can identify the guy. Even lapho abantu ababekhona I can identify the guy even because even sesihamba lapho ngambona undodo wakhona.
He decided to go and report the assault at Luveve police station. But when he got there, the lady who had encouraged the police to assault them was at the station, and she was the superintendent.
Umama lo wangibiza esemoteni wathi lo kabuye ngapha. Mayithi kabuye ngapha wathi umsungwa wethu. Then I started getting surprised ngahamba ngabhoda ngawe ukuthi ngizwe wathi umsungwa mnathi umsungwa njani wabethi wena $500 ifine le misconduct. Mnathi hayi but ngizoreporta phela ngizange ngibotshwe mina. He means wele wathi I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. Suddenly mayenza njalo you know the police officer a highest ranking officer ubuya lo muntu usho kanjalo. Suddenly bangcwala. You'll be trying to explain yourself. Nobody want to listen to you. Hey, this and that. Yeah, so. Hey, this and that. Yeah, visa band. Yeah, gara. Go under the counter. Hey, what? You are trying to explain yourself. Formula is saying, yeah, this and that. Nobody is listening to you. Eh. So ngagcina sengikhipha ibhanti sengilokhuza ngihlala lapha uthi ngithi phone thatha ifoni ngapha ngithi avunyela ukufona thatha ifoni then after also okuthiwa ifoni sengilokhe ngicela nginsist ukuthi ifoni manje kumele ngifoni. So I only phoned ukuthi ngithi mina lapha benzoreporta icase so sengibotshiwe. Then suddenly vele abanikezanga ichance. I was thrown estoxini.
The cell he was thrown in was filthy with human excrement. There was no water. Even when he asked for water, the police didn't bother giving him any. His neighbors came to the rescue the following day and paid a fine for his release. We asked him if he pursued the case further.
I never made a complaint anymore. Whom was I going to complain to? By that then, ngangizohamba ngiyephi to trust the people who complain akubo if a highest ranking officer, a superintendent, ezakuthathe kuvalele, then whom do you complain to? I'm one of the people, even I told you that I'm a law-abiding citizen. I watch, like, I have a EZPC. I like a police report. They always say you report. So I thought maybe when they're saying that you report, they are always telling the truth. But it seems to me that now there's nothing like that. If they can beat me, what about an ordinary man who cannot stand for himself? Me, I'm a pastor. I help so many people in so many ways. I'm one of the people, I can stand proud and say, I'm in Zimbabwean asset, even when with the unsaying heroes. But I'm one of those people
Not only were ordinary civilians arbitrarily targeted by the police, state security agents also took the opportunity to pursue opposition activists. Takunda Madzana is a member of the National Youth Executive of the Movement for Democratic Change Alliance, the main opposition party. On suspicion of him being part of protest organizers, state security agents visited him under the cover of darkness.
On the 26th of July this year, I was home at around 12 a.m. I was asleep in my room. Then suddenly I just heard some funny sounds outside. But before I could actually check on what was actually happening outside, my door was not closed. Because, in Magwegwe, I stay in New Magwegwe. In Magwegwe, our toilets are outside. So I wanted to visit the toilet before I could then come and sleep. Then before I could even do that, I then heard some funny sounds outside. Then the next thing I saw, like my door being opened. It was just pushed once, and the next thing I knew actually that there was a problem. I never even thought about criminals, armed robbers or anything, but I knew that it was something which was most likely going to be something political, because there was a demonstration which was coming on the 31st. Like they always do that, whenever there's a demonstration, these guys would target activists. Then before I could actually take any action, the next thing that happened is that I saw 4 guys just getting into my room, and they were all in masks, black ones, like not ordinary masks, the one that actually covers the whole head, and I could actually see, the only thing that I could actually see were their eyes. Then they were heavily armed. They had AK-47 rifles and pistols with them. Then the next thing, as soon as they got into the house, they pointed a gun at me and told me to shut up. And one of the guys started actually slapping me, and I was putting on a jacket. I was then asked to take off my jacket. He was like, "Visa, visa, visa, visa," and I was forced to take off my jacket. And the other thing is that they were also fluent in Shona. There were 4 Shona guys. I also come from a Shona background. I can actually tell between someone who is Shona or Ndebele. The accent could actually tell me that these guys were Shona, like me. Then the next thing, I was forced out of the house by 2 guys. Then the other 2 remained searching my room. Then as soon as I got to the gate, that is when I realized that these guys were driving a 4x4 Isuzu twin cab, white in color, and it had a canopy. and I was bundled. They'd left it with the door open, one of the doors, like at the back. I was then bundled into the car and forced to put my head in between the front seats, facing down, so that I could not even see where the car was going. Then maybe after about 5 minutes, the other two guys who were searching my room joined us. That is where there was a driver and the other guy who was seated in front, who was more like the one who was commanding the four of them. They then drove off from my place, and the only thing that I still remember is that they turned left, then they turned left again. Then from there, the car was like 32 to like rotate the car at on one place, so that from there I couldn't even tell whether the car was now going north or south or anywhere. So they drove about they then drove about 30 to 40 minutes, up to a point where I could then hear that the car was now probably in a highway. It was now moving fast. As soon as we got to where they parked their car, they started harassing me, without even saying anything. One would grab me, pull me this side, and then the other one would just hit me using their butts, like of their guns. Then later on, that is when they then started asking me questions.
On the 23rd of May 2020, a team of police officers and Neighborhood Watch Committee members went out on an evening patrol in hillside suburb Bulawayo. The two police officers were armed with AK-47 rifles. Just before 10 p.m., they came across a parked black Honda Fit. When they tried to block it, the driver drove away until they caught up with him. The driver tried to escape again, but members of the police fired 7 shots at the vehicle. The driver lost control of the vehicle and drove it into a ditch. One of the bullets had hit the driver, Paul Munakopa, in the arm, and he was bleeding from the gunshot wound. An ambulance arrived and he was taken to the United Bulawayo hospitals. In the early hours of the following day, the medical staff declared Paul dead from the gunshot wounds. The two officers who shot at Munakopa are Constables Langton Makonye and Bigson Nyoni. At the time, the two were stationed at Support Unit Fairbridge. They had been deployed by Assistant Inspector Gilbert Zuwarimwe to carry out the patrols. Our investigating team concludes that the two Support Unit officers did not have reasonable grounds to shoot. It was simply not justifiable under the circumstances. The officers could be charged with murder as defined in the Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act. In April 2021, the family of the late Munakopa sued Home Affairs Minister Kazembe, Police Commissioner General Godwin Matanga, the two police officers, and the Neighborhood Watch Committee members. The family says the individuals should pay over 400,000 United States dollars for the loss of support to the family and Paul's minor children. The family wants the amount to cover for emotional shock and trauma for the murder of Paul.
Ndingati pari zvino kubva musi waenda mwana wangu kusvika izvozvi handisi kukwanisa kurara, handisi kukwanisa kurarama mararamiro andanga achiita naye. Ndine mwana wechikoro ari kuZambia, ari mufinal year, ari kuita law. Ndiye aimhanya kuti mwana awane fees. Izvozvi this semester mwana anotori nechikwereti. Kubvira last year ndakatozama kutaura navo kuti ndo zviripo, vakandinzwisisa, mwana akanyora. Saka izvozvi June uno vanofanira kuti anyore vachivhara musi wa24 June. Handina kana kuziva kuti ndinowana kopi mari yacho, handisi kuziva. Baba vakashayika kudhara, vakatinetsekawo vakaita kidney failure. Saka ndiye futi airapisa baba vakashayika 2018. Saka ndiri pakaoma, ndinoti kurwadziwa nemwana wangu ndikuti kurwadziwa nekurarama kwangu. Ini pachangu ndine BP, ndorwara like last week but one ndandiri kuchipatara kuita mari dzokukwereta kuti ndirapiwe. Ndakabatwa shuga, saka
zvakandiomera ndokufa kwaPaul. Ende chinyaya kundorwadza handina kana even one munhu wehurumende akauya akanditi sorry chii chakaitika, hapana. They just ignore. Kunge paurayiwa tsuro pati munhu ini background yangu anondiziva kusaka kumusha kwangu ndakarwira chimurenga, ndine chigwido changa chakabata kuti kwasvika kunzvimbo yangu kundibvunza ini hapana munhu asingandizivi tichirwira chimurenga. Asi mwana wangu orayiwa nenzira yakadaro zvinondibata. Handisi loja remuZimbabwe, ndiri muZimbabwe by birth, ndikazvarirwa muno ndikakurira muno ndikabata zvakawanda zvemuno. Mwana wangu aitowawo muyuth akasimba, but mafiro ake anondirwadza. Handina pokutangira. Even mumba aita chandivakira handina. Pano pandirikugara ndine zvikwereti zvemarenti, ndiye aibhadhara renti handina. Saka nguva ndotombofunga kuti ndife nditevere mwana wangu is better, because handina kwandiri kuenda nelife. Ende vandinopromisa vacho like panopamba ndinopromisa kuti ndichawana mari, but ndikatarisa kwese handina. Mamaski akandisiyira kuti nditengese ari mumba hipe yemamaski ma20,000, but handigoni kuti nditengese, handina mabhaya acho. Saka ndiri kurarama zvinorwadza nokufa kwaPaul, ndiri kurarama zvinorwadza, ndiri kuremerwa. Handinomboti mwana wangu akafa zviri nani, inini ndiri kutoyaya kurwadziwa than iye, nokuti hatisisiri munhu ane health. Nenyaya yaPaul akandirwadza. Ndakaswera nemwana wangu zvakanaka pano, kungoti mama chamboperekedza adresi, that's all. Kuzofonerwa kuti Paul apfurwa, ndichimanya chienda pasini ndichibvunza mafuriro emwana wangu handina kuwana. Mapurisa akatoseka, they loved me kuseka. Mwana wangu akatotakurwa aenda kuUPH, ndichisvika kwaingodaidza mama ndibatsirei, but I failed to help my son. Kusvikira mwana wangu afa takatarisa, handina chandakawana. Ndakaviga mwana wangu ndega ndichitambudzika, kana wana akandibatsira kana kuti vandipe kana mavegetables zvawo kuti tavaurayira mwana. Mwana wangu musikana akamira kuti tivige hanzvadzi yake up to now. Handizivi kuti mhosva yacho ndei, handizivi kuti mhosva yacho ndiyei. Even akamuuraya Bigson Nyoni Langton Magonye, ndakasenda mwana wangu ari mukofi, ndikati mwana wangu wamauraya uyu uyai mundiudze kuti mhosva yacho ndei. Havana kundipindura up to now. Ndiri kurwadziwa, ndiri kuremerwa. Hapana chakanaka mulife changu nokufa kwaPaul. Hapana. Gore rinoiti mama tinogadzisa guva ramama 2021 tondovaisira Stormstone. Hapana achazviita iye rake racho, hapana. Kaenda ukanzi undofunza kuti togadzisira mwana wangu Stormstone, vatondiudza kuti ndinongoisa head. Ndikati aiwa ndina hanzvadzi yangu imwe yanga yanditira zvakanaka kuti ndivakire guva remwana wangu. Ndiri kurambidzwa futi kuti usavakira Stormstone rese isai head chete. Saka ini ndiri kuremerwa. Handizivi mhosva yangu muno muZimbabwe kuti ndei, handizivi. Handirari mwana wangu, handirari mumba. Ndinomuka kugara pasi ndichidaidza kuti nai Paul wakafireiko, nai Paul chiiko chawakasangana nacho mwana wangu.
In another case, in the early hours of the 28th of June 2020, police who claimed to have been on a livestock theft patrol shot and injured Emmanuel Mavunge. Emmanuel explains the circumstances of the incident.
Kuchesa forest ndichinobva kunotorwa nedzangu. Saka ndichisvika pane chimwe chibridge pane chigwezi chonzi Solide papa. Ndobva ndasungana nemota Toyota Hilux. Ndanga ine keji rekutakura mombe. Then ndobva flasha malights. So ini ndakabva ndadhima malights angu, ndakati pamwe ndakamulaita nemalights, ndobva ndadhima malights. Ndobva tatopesana. Then after 1.5 kilometers, ndobva ndaona malights kusure kwemota. Saka kana chifamba mudust road papa akaona kumota kusure kune mota iri kunyazi iri kutevera iri kuda kupinda. Kati apeta ndivhurire ndimire paside mota yaidariki. Road yacho yanga yapa wide bijana pa zvakaitikira. Then ndobva ndamira papa. Saka ndakatotarisa ku right side kwangu ndida kundoona kuti mota yape inodarika. Ndoburuka ndombocheka kumavhiri angu kuti mavhiri ari right here izvo munhu angabva road dziri right. Samota yachisvika ndakaona window rakavhurika repassenger rere. Pakabuda bharero repfuta nepawindow papa. Ranga rakavhurika mbijana. Bharero repfuta rakabuda nepamusoro nepawindow papa. Saka pakanobhureka driver akarova emergency brakes yakuda kundidarika. Driver wemota yaihilux yayo. Pakanobhureka ichinomira ndopandakawa sound yefuti ndibva ndaona glass rangu radriver rere richindiwira mukati remota. Saka muchindi yangaridza futi nobva buda mota achibva uya kwandandiri. Panzi buda mota. Saka pandakazama kusumudza ndasingazozi ndafusvitiwa papa. Pandakazama kusumudza kuti ndivhure door ndopandakabva kwaramba kusumuka. Ndobva ndatoti handichagona kubuda mota watondikuvadza watondifura. Then tsano dzangu vandichifamba navo vanga vakagara ku left ndovakabva vavhura door ravo ndobva vazovhura door remotikari kuti ndibude. Muchindi wayo anga andivhura ndopakauya padhuze aida kuona kuti ndakuvara zvakaita sei. Ndobva vandibata achinditwisa kudai so aida kuona ubhegi. Ndobva adzokera kune vamwe vake tu vanga nawo kwanzi shamari takuvadza munhu toita sei. Ndobva vatoti beta tiende pamasuweji pabulawa yewater works papa. Vanogona kutibatsira neambulance ikauya papa yakatakura munhu. Ndobva vandisa mumotikari yavo pickup yemasure. Ndina tsano nadriver wacho neumwe mupurisa anga asina kundipfura wacho. Iyoyo anga andipfura anobva asara kumotikari. Neumwe muchindi wandaifamba naye munin'ina anonzi Masuku. Ndobva vasara vari 2. Saka tisati tatouya papa pakamboti argument tsano bheno vakati aiwa mota iyo muregeri ipapo bhozi mati imateta mhosva. Pachauya mapurisa achazoona kuti mashuta mota yakamira sei zvakaita sei. Sabhoti mota iyo mufanira muiregeri ipapo position ipapo. Isu nobva tazosumuka tikaenda kuwater works pandakazotogwa neambulance. Then ivo manje machinda aya anobva vasara nokubvisa mota pasini nokuenda kunayo driver nokuenda nayo kugreen gables. Saka zvimwe zvakazoitika iko ndakati vakavatesa mbanje mukati memotikari. Kati mbanje dzachona dzakazobvisiwa hamendi vakazozita sei nemapurisa aiita nyaya yacho. Ndavada create scene kana ndavada sei. Then ndinobva ndagara pamasuweji papa unonga about 30 minutes or so. Ambulance inobva yazosvika. Ndaendeswa kuMpilo.
He was admitted for 6 days at Mpilo Hospital.
Takangopedza kuiswa drip nemvu neblood. Dokta akati nesituation iri pecorona iyi. Ukagara muno muchipatara wakabatwa necorona unogona kutourawa necorona than kuurawa nemaunzo. Because they suspected kuti one of my lungs yakakuwara. Saka ti haiwa beta uende kumba unoenda kuchiclinic. Ndobva vanipa namba dzavo madhokota aya kwanzi kana any problem yawaita unotifonera direct kwandiri. Then we can readmit you. But kana kuri right unoenda kuclinic vachindipa madays okudzoka kureview. Nonga after every week ndaidzokera kuMpilo kuti vachiona progress yehealing yemaunza aya.
Emmanuel feels that investigation into his matter are just a farce. He says police do not show any commitment to get the matter resolved through timely court processes.
Nyaya yacho iri kukoti. Ndakatora almost 4 months kuti izopinda kukoti nyaya yacho. Handisi kuti my investigations aitiwa anga akaita sei. But ndikwandiri ndikutoona soti kwanga kungo delay kuti otherwise munhu atanga ahila ukazoenda kukoti wakakuvara pamwe magistrate anozoona kuti munhu wakakuvarisa. Wose zvino dokota magistrate anenge akutobvunza wakakuvara zvakaita sei. Takutotaura nezvinhu zvisipo. But papa deni yakapinda aidira achiona kuti ndikavhura ona kuti munhu akakuvara sei. Because nemuromo you can't you can't express munhu akabvunza kuti wakakuvara zvakaita sei, but kana ipapo munhu akaona anonyatsoona kuti munhu akuvara. So I think vanongozviita deliberately kuti munhu ahile, then vozoendesa kuti pasina evidence kuti munhu akakuvara sei. Sezvo munhu akandipfuura ari mapurisa akadhileya kuita kesi yacho. Ende even kukoti kwacho aparatidzi kuti pane investigation yakaitiwa inobetsera kuti inini nyaya yangu imire zvakanaka. In fact panotoita sokutoti munyato wacho ndokutoti nyaya yacho ingoita faneka nyaya ina basa, because hapana mupurisa wakamboita investigata kunyatsa kutaura kuti zvakaifamba zvakadai.
Our investigating team revisited the scene where the incident occurred. It also interviewed key contacts who were privy to the case. The team established that Constable Ernest Zinzi shot Emmanuel Mavunga without justification. The officers could have stopped Emmanuel's vehicle without shooting at it. The use of a firearm was unwarranted as there was no direct threat posed by Emmanuel and passengers in his vehicle. The team concludes that Constable Ernest Zinzi violated the Zimbabwe Republic Police Circular 12/05 on firearm use. The circular states that if a vehicle fails to stop at a roadblock and makes a U-turn, police should not fire at it unless they are certain beyond doubt that it is a wanted vehicle or its occupants are wanted persons. The police circular makes a specific instruction: do not fire in order to investigate. The team recommends that the case should be followed up until its finalization. It also suggests that Emmanuel may also explore a civil case procedure so he can be compensated for the injuries he sustained. In all the cases that we covered, police were let off the hook by their victims who are not confident that justice can be served. In some cases, the trial processes were taking too long for the victims, who felt that the delay was undermining justice. The victims are either waiting or giving up. The culture of impunity is still entrenched. The police know that they can commit the violations and rely on the general disregard of human rights. The Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights appealed to the government to respect people's dignity, freedoms, and rights.